Hello folks, so this is basically what I played at my own nationals this past weekend. I know in many countries the nationals is gonna be happening just this next weekend, so I figured out in addition to some tournament reports, so this will be handy, so this will be basically a tactic. And I'll be also discussing what to do up next with this deck after rotation. So basically you can play this for still for about 2 weeks, but then, well, yeah, for 3 weeks technically, I guess. So, but then after that you'll have to figure out something. And yeah, the options are not that great because Excellent doesn't really bring all that much to this deck. I'll talk about a few cards that I've played so far. Of course, we don't know the full set yet. Not all the spoilers been out yet, but so far, not many options for this deck though. So yeah, let's dive in. So a lot of stuff in here is kind of you know, stock stuff, something that you pretty much have to play. I'll just go through some points that I've also covered in the tournament report, just major differences between this list and what everybody's been playing and what you could be playing. 8 planes, just a nod to the sideboarded authorities and extra WA cards in the sideboard, basically. Also makes running stuff like Stasis Snare much easier. And then what I've seen is that people have been playing one of the Blue the Deserts, the one that mills for free. It's basically a nod for mirror matches, and also sometimes helps you to find it as well. I mean, find your approaches faster. That's basically your win condition in the main deck and your main plan basically every game. But sometimes you could be actually, you know, killing them with Singleton Kefnet, for example. Always with some caracals after the Lost Legacy, if you let it resolve. Yeah, basically that's the whole idea. So you just draw a bunch and try to survive and cast approach a couple of times in the game and win. And yeah, I've seen people running a couple of port towns in place of a fourth cycle end and fourth basic duel. And then instead of Cataract, what I've seen was the Westvale Abbey. I think it's fine, but I think Cataract just does way more for the deck than just a random 1-1. It does help you to chum block if you're flooding and you just don't draw any removal. Outside of that, I don't see much of use of it. I mean, you can win with it in like super duper grindy games, but that's just so marginal. I decided to not even think about this that much. But maybe it's the correct choice, but I didn't feel like it would fit me. Then basically outside of just maximizing some numbers like on Alliance and Approach, for example, so what I did was I ran Singleton Glare on Summon and Stasis Snare in the flag slots, which previously been occupied by Revolutionary buff, which is probably the card that we'll have to play in that slot, I feel like, and it's been actually quite fine for me. But I just wanted a bit more flexibility and a bit more removal, interactivity. I don't think I would want to just run on summons in that slot. I think rebuff is actually what we want. Maybe like 2 unsummons and 1 rebuff until we figure out something. If there will be pretty much nothing in Exelon for this deck, for this slots. Yeah, that's basically about it. Some builds have Pull from Tomorrow in the slot of the potential 4th elimination, but I think that's extra. I don't think it's a bad idea to run 1 Sphinx main over 1 approach. I think it's fine, but I kind of want, kind of like 4 approaches, just makes the deck much more consistent, and you can always just run it in the sideboard. And you definitely should have at least 1 in your 75, that's for sure. and then you could run one dismissal in the sideboard as well, instead of one of those flex cards. Yeah, but the first build I tried actually had one less land, just 25, and then in these 4 flex slots plus the land I had the 4 rebuffs, and then in the sideboard, outside of must-have cards like Authority and Curacles, the rest were just 4 Gideons, the 4 mana ones, and 4 Spell Quellers. It was a pretty fair and square plan, but it just lacked flexibility, even though the cards were like good on a lot of matchups in general, but and you would be able to board them in a lot of matchups, but they just didn't feel that great outside of few situations. Yeah, and then you could run in those flex slots as 1 or 2 free mana Gideons of the Trials. That's probably what we'll end up doing. So there's a chance we'll be playing just 2 free mana Gideons and like 1 unsummon or something in these slots, and the rest will probably stay as is after rotation. That's be my guess, of because instead of Cataract we'll probably be playing those deserts or something. Like now you can have space for those 2 blue deserts. Makes your mana a bit slightly better for the price of, some damage or whatever. Then, as for sideboards, outside of the usual authorities and Curacles, I don't think you want to run authority in the main deck because people are ready for Mono Rat, even though it's gonna show up and Zombie's gonna show up and Mardu's gonna show up, but still, a big chunk of the fields would not be fearing authorities, for example. And Caracals is just fantastic against Mono Red and pretty much any aggro, any mid-range, against Mardu, against zombies, against Timor Energy, against a lot of decks. And Kefnet is in here in the slot of the Torrential Gear Hulk. Kinda liked it. It's much easier to tap out for this and then to try to win with that instead of the Hulk. Hulk just gives you an extra like counter capability, but that's kind of marginal. It's much better in the decks that don't have white and don't run approaches, for example. And yeah, occasionally it will actually just win Timor Energy matchup if cast on turn 3 and if you just keep the Virtuoso in check, for example. Yeah, that happened to me and that happened to a few people actually. Sphinx is a must. When the Sand is a must, basically, just because you need it for zombies, for the Jessica gift deck, for I would actually bring it in against Blue-Red just because they're now splashing the Scarab God and that chain is just so frustrating to play against. So there are quite a few matchups where you want it in. I might even board it in against the Timor Energy as well, even though they're supposed to try to go a bit more grindy with the Hulks and stuff like that and just commit less to the board. But most of the builds would still commit a lot. I thought about running a Singleton Dispel, but Free Negate was just a safe choice. I felt like I wouldn't blame anybody like for running a Dispel in addition or instead of one of the negates. But yeah, I did want to have like some counter magic like that. Disallow was too cute, especially for main deck, and negate is just much better because it's simply 2 mana. But Dismissal, even though it costs 4, but it's one answer to Sphinx, one answer to Scarab Hulk Chain, and also counters all the stuff from the ramp decks, all the old Razes with all those cast triggers and so on. So that's basically it. Okay, let's now talk a little bit about the few cards that I actually liked and excellent so far. So there is this thing. So it's a 2-mana enchantment, and you can just, scry 1 every turn, sort of. Get yourself closer to approach. And actually it's not too hard to have like 7 or more cards in your graveyard because of all the cycling. and then what you get is basically a lance that lets you again dig deeper for your approach. Might be a bit too cute and inconsistent, but I think it's an interesting card and it deserves some attention for this deck. So this is important because I did want to actually run the Crooks in the sideboard of this deck at some point, because well, gift decks and the merge decks and all those weird, decks with blue zombies and stuff. So they were quite annoying, and this is better than a Crook. It lets you scry, it costs 1. So yeah, this thing, well, it's 4 and we already have Fumigates, but then we won't have Descent, we won't have access to that. I'm not sure if I'll have space for this main deck, maybe for like 1 or 2 or something, potentially, and more, probably 2 more in the sideboard or something like that, because the card is actually good against aggro decks and, well, mid-range basically, because you don't care about them getting like extra basics unless they're like a ramp deck, or in the mirror. Well, you're not gonna be casting this in the mirror. Not really. So yeah, the drawback of this card is actually doesn't really matter because they still have counter spells and all those fumigates and basically a fast win con. Well, fast. I mean, kind of almost immediate win con. And that's something I'd consider. Of course, spell pierce. It's actually a bit more frightening for other decks against us, instead of us running this, because, well, we're gonna probably like play 1 main, 1 sideboard at some point, and it doesn't really help us all that much. It actually helps way more to other decks, but it's still a card that is a good option for this deck as well, but not as exciting as for everybody else, unfortunately. I think that's about it, so thanks for watching. Until the next sale, goodbye folks.